166 people descended with dreams of returning home, but a single runway turned their dreams into a nightmare, taking their lives. A story where every second became a witness to a new mistake. Do you want to know about the one decision that could have made the difference between tragedy and survival? May 20th, 2010. A seemingly normal morning that was supposed to fulfill the dreams of 166 people. Air India Express Flight 812 took off from Dubai, heading to Mangalore, but it never reached its destination. This wasn't just an accident, it was a chain reaction of wrong decisions, fatigue, and the challenges of a treacherous runway. From the cockpit to the edge of the runway, every second brought a new twist. How did one fatal mistake turn this flight into a horror story? Do you know what makes tabletop runways so dangerous? Let's find out. Stay with us as we uncover the challenges the pilots faced during landing. On the night of May 21st, 2010, everything seemed routine at Dubai International Airport. Air India Express, Flight 812, was ready to take off for Mangalore. This was a modern and safe aircraft, a Boeing 737-800, designed for short to medium-distance flights. Delivered in 2007, the plane had an excellent safety record and was equipped with advanced technology like autopilot and warning systems to help pilots avoid collisions and ground impact. It was also fuel-efficient and designed to carry 189 passengers comfortably. But no matter how advanced an aircraft is, it ultimately relies on human decisions. And when mistakes happen, the consequences can be catastrophic, as they were for Flight 812. This flight carried 6 crew members and 166 passengers. The pilots of Air India Express Flight 812 were Captain Zlatko Glusica and First Officer Ahmad Gulzar. Captain Zlatko Glusica was an experienced pilot with over 10,000 flight hours, 7,500 of which were on the Boeing 737. He was a Serbian national who had worked for European airlines before joining Air India Express. Despite his vast experience, Captain Glusica was in an unusual state that night. He had flown for several hours prior and was extremely fatigued. Yet, he chose to take on the responsibility of this flight, a decision that would later play a critical role in the unfolding story. Captain Zlatko Glusica's condition is a key element, one you should remember as the story takes its twists. First Officer Ahmad Gulzar. First Officer Ahmad Gulzar, an Indian national, was less experienced than Captain Glusica, with approximately 3,700 flight hours. His role was to assist the captain in monitoring the aircraft's systems and managing communications. Before departure, both pilots performed a thorough inspection of the aircraft, as is standard procedure. The passengers. The majority of passengers on board were individuals who had gone to Dubai to earn a livelihood for themselves and their families. They were returning home, eager to reunite with their loved ones after a long time. The joy and anticipation were palpable. Inside the aircraft, the atmosphere was like that of any regular flight. Children played with their toys in their parents' laps, while flight attendants tried to provide comfort to the parents. Some passengers sat quietly in their seats, reciting prayers, perhaps flying for the first time. Others, exhausted from their journeys, reclined their seats, and tried to rest. Little did they know that their happiness was fleeting, and what awaited them was beyond anyone's imagination. Flight 812 took off from Dubai at 2 a.m. as per routine. Captain Zlatko Glusica and First Officer Ahmad Gulzar were in the cockpit, while 166 passengers were seated behind, ready for their journey. Everything seemed smooth. The plane was cruising at altitude, passengers were relaxed, and the cockpit systems displayed normal readings. However, lurking behind this smooth journey was an unseen threat: fatigue. Captain Zlatko, despite being an experienced pilot, was visibly tired. Reports indicate his rest schedule had been disrupted, and this fatigue was directly affecting his performance. Once the plane stabilized at cruise altitude, Captain Zlatko fell asleep in the cockpit due to exhaustion. This raises a critical question. If the captain was asleep, who was in control of the plane? The autopilot managed the systems, while First Officer Ahmad Gulzar monitored the cockpit. However, with less experience, the first officer was in a supporting role. As the plane approached Mangalore, a critical phase of the flight began, landing on Mangalore's runway. But what makes Mangalore's runway so dangerous? Let's explore the challenging runway of Mangalore. The runway at Mangalore Airport is a key factor in understanding this tragedy. Mangalore Bajpayee Airport is located in South India's hilly terrain and is one of the world's most challenging tabletop runways. A tabletop runway is situated on elevated ground, surrounded by steep slopes or valleys. This design makes landings and takeoffs extremely difficult. If a plane overshoots the runway or lands short, the surrounding terrain makes it highly vulnerable to a crash. Both ends of Mangalore's runway feature steep drops into valleys, increasing the risk of fatal accidents. The runway measures 8,033 feet, 2,448 meters, in length, adequate for wide-body aircraft, but requiring perfect precision and timing for every landing and takeoff. The runway becomes even more challenging during the monsoon season. Rain makes the surface slippery, forcing pilots to rely heavily on brakes and thrust reversers. Additionally, the airport's location and design complicate the approach angle. As planes approach Mangalore, pilots must maintain a precise descent angle, supported by glide slope and instrument landing systems. However, if the approach angle is incorrect, too high or too low, it becomes nearly impossible to land safely on this runway. In the case of Air India Express Flight 812, this very issue arose. As the plane approached the runway, the system started issuing warnings. Glide slope unstable. The glide slope is a visual and electronic guide that helps pilots maintain the correct angle and altitude for landing. An unstable glide slope was a clear red flag. However, Captain Zlatko, now awake, chose to ignore the warning and decided to perform a manual landing. He was still under the effects of fatigue. As the descent began, the plane remained at a higher than ideal altitude for the runway. First Officer Ahmad repeatedly warned, "We are too high." But the captain did not take these warnings seriously. His plan was to descend and land the plane in the middle of the runway, rather than the beginning. Every runway has an ideal touchdown zone, typically within the first few hundred meters of its length. Flight 812 missed this zone entirely and landed far beyond the midpoint of the runway. The runway, already short, did not provide enough distance to brake effectively. The plane skidded down the runway at a speed of 240 kilometers per hour. The thrust, reversers, and brakes were deployed, but they could not work quickly enough due to the plane's excessive speed and weight. When Captain Zlatko realized that the plane had overshot the touchdown zone and the runway was rapidly running out, he made an extreme last-minute decision to attempt a go-around and get the aircraft airborne again. Near the end of the runway, the captain increased engine thrust and tried to lift off, but it was far too late. The Boeing 737-800 could not achieve the required speed and lift for takeoff. The plane overshot the runway, plunged off the edge into a steep valley, and crashed. As the aircraft exited the runway, it broke apart upon impact and caught fire. Tragically, out of 166 people on board, only 8 survived. The rest succumbed to the fire and crash injuries. This journey was not just a flight. It was a deadly combination of human fatigue, poor decision-making, and environmental challenges. Every warning system was functioning, but when human factors fail, even modern technology cannot save the situation. This tragedy served as a stark reminder of the dangers of underestimating fatigue in aviation. What can we learn? Fatigue management. Fatigue plays a critical role in aviation. Captain Zlatko's lack of proper rest and the neglect of fatigue's effects were major contributing factors. Cockpit communication. A lack of clear communication and an imbalance in authority between the captain and the first officer prevented effective decision-making. Runway infrastructure. Challenging environments like Mangalore's tabletop runway require advanced safety measures and improved infrastructure. Technology versus human factor. Warning systems and advanced technology are only effective when humans are capable of understanding and acting on them in time. Conclusion: every warning system and every safety feature can fail if human decisions do not support them. Air India Express Flight 812 was not just a crash, it was a stark reminder of how small mistakes can snowball into a catastrophic tragedy. In the end, it was a chain reaction of errors that cost 166 lives. What do you think? Can technology ever truly mitigate the risks of fatigue and human error? Share your thoughts in the comments below.